Hi, 8th graders, and welcome to a new week. It is Monday, October the 5th. So if you are wondering if you're in the right place, if you're looking for October the 5th videos, then yes, you're in the right place. So today we are going to be mostly focusing on lesson 15 in our pink textbook, but I do want to go over with you a little bit about what we are doing the rest of the week. So we're going to review a little bit of diagramming from last Wednesday. For our writing today, what you are going to do is you are going to read a short story / poem. I think there's poetic pieces in it. It's called Rikki Tikki Tavi, and it has been posted on Sycamore. I have also posted in the multimedia section an audio version of this, as I think it would be fun to listen to. So you could perhaps read it and listen to it. And we're going to be discussing this on Wednesday. We're going to be doing a lot more analyzing of literature, looking at different kinds of literature techniques, literary analysis, but specifically with the Rikki Tikki Tavi, we're going to be comparing him to some other kind of heroes that we have, some real people, some fiction. We're going to be comparing him to Frederick Douglass, and also we're going to compare him to Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. We read those last year, and even if you haven't read them, I think you probably know who those characters are. So on Wednesday, we will be doing an analysis of that. You're going to have an opportunity to write stories later in the year. So we're going to be looking at these short stories, and then you will have an opportunity to do that later. Tomorrow you will be completing homework as always, and then you will be writing down some of your thoughts about Rikki Tikki Tavi. What did you like or not like? Compare him to Frederick Douglass. Consider how they were alike or different in the causes they were fighting for. How would you describe him in a descriptive essay? So be prepared for that. Also be prepared to recite the preamble on Wednesday, and there's a video up about history of the battle hymn. So if you want to watch that, we will be continuing those discussions on the battle hymn, symbolism, and then also looking at our Rikki Tikki Tavi story. I can't say that very well. But for today, we are focusing just on a lesson 15. So if you would turn in your fun pink textbook to page 70, make sure I have the right one. Yes, 77, the complex sentence. Now, as you know, last week we talked a little bit about simple sentences. We also talked about compound sentences. And there were, we looked at sentences that had compound subjects with one verb. We looked at sentences that had two subjects, two verbs, but we had to figure out the categories for each of those as far as what kind of sentences they were. So today we're actually moving into a new category. Let's first review the other sentences. We talked about simple and compound. So a simple sentence we know is simply something that is just one independent clause, just one independent. Just like your mom, your dad, they're very independent. This one can stand alone, so the dog ate the cat. Simple sentence. Now, a compound sentence is going to have two or more independents. The dog ate the cat and the mouse ran home. That is a compound sentence. It's got subject verb connected by the word and then another subject verb. So today we flip back over to page 77, and we're looking at complex sentences. And so the difference with these, I want you to look at the definition in the gray box. It contains one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So mom ran to the store and then back home, and then she came back home. Sorry, I'm giving you bad examples. Mom ran to the store, and when she came back home, dropped Mike off. We could go on with the subject and verb combinations, but they just can't be independent clauses. So we're going to look at some better examples from the book than me trying to rattle them off in my head. And while we're doing that, we're actually going to be then dividing things into 3 categories. What kinds of clauses are going to show up in these complex sentences? So let's take a look at some examples. If you look right in the middle of page 77, it says we love God because he first loved us. So there's the independent. We love God because he first loved us. We know that that can't stand by itself. It's got that because. Or I could put when, or I could put while. Any of those, though, are going to make it dependent. They can't stand by themselves. The grammar gods would come and punish us if we did that. Here's another one. God sent his only begotten Son, who willingly suffered for us. God sent his only begotten Son. That's an independent, can stand all by itself. Who willingly suffered for us, though, cannot stand alone unless it's a question mark. So if I were to say, who willingly suffered for us? That is a question and could be a complete sentence, but not in this case. So I think you understand that the complex, simple is just 1 independent. Compound, 2 independent with the word and or but or something between. Complex, though, is 1 independent, 1 dependent, maybe more. Kind of like a family. Here's your mom. Here's you, all working together. All right. These clauses, though, are going to show up in 3 different ways. They could show up as adjective clauses, adverb clauses, or noun clauses. So we've got 3 categories. I'm going to make a little chart on the board, and I do want you to take notes on this. So adjective clauses, adverb clauses, and noun clauses. So when our dependent clauses show up, they're going to show up as one or the other of this. So if I said to you, look at that sentence and tell me what the dependent clause is doing. What's its function? You have to tell me one of these. Okay, we'll look at those in just a second, or in some samples. Now let's look at the definition. An adjective clause modifies the noun or pronoun in the independent clauses, and it usually starts with a relative pronoun, and they give you the choices that's there. So it's going to modify a noun in the independent, and relative pronouns is what's going to start it. So you might want to write down that little list they give us there. Who, whom, whose, which, that. Who, whom, whose, which, and that. Now, you should recognize this because we know this to be a who-which clause. So if you hop on over to your IEW side of your brain, you're going to say, oh, those are who-which clauses. There's the who, which, and then remember that can also be in the who-which category. That makes sense. Mom drove by the store, which had just burned down. Mom drove by the store. Remember, store is a noun in that independent clause. The which clause tells me which store. Mom drove by the store, which had just burned down. So we know that it is modifying that store. That's how adjective clauses work. They're those who, which. Now hop over to page 78. We're going to do some diagramming in just a minute, but I'm not going to erase this to do the diagramming. But I want you to look at the samples with me. Now those of you who were with us last year know that you use a connecting dotted line to connect the main skeleton, remember that line you draw for diagramming, with the secondary skeleton, which is this guy, which had just burned down. We want to put that on a secondary line, but look and see the sentence is, the minister who preached yesterday lives in Texas. I need to get the primary. What's this main thing that this is about? Well, the minister, what does the minister do? Lives. Don't tell me that he preached. That's part of the secondary clause. Okay? So you would tell me that who lives? Well, the minister. What did the minister do? He lives. Please do not get that confused with that dependent clause. So the main independent clause is minister lives. But then we have this piece that says who preached yesterday. That's just telling me more about him. And I'm going to draw the little dotted line down to the secondary line. And who preached is our subject verb. And you're probably going, why can who be the subject? We'll talk about that in a minute. If you have one of these, though, it is probably going to be the subject for the dependent clause. Here's one that's a little bit more confusing. I did not know the man whom he brought along. Now this one's a little different because it's going to modify the direct object. So here we go. What's the main thing? I is the subject. Did know, remember not goes underneath because it's an adverb. I did know what or who? Man. So that goes in, the man goes in direct object space. And whom is beside the man. So that's probably going to modify it. So if you've got a direct object, you need to drop that dotted line off the direct object. And then it gets a little confusing. Whom is going to be a direct object. So if you have something in your sentence that says, that has the word whom in it, you're thinking, oh, Mrs. Jernigan said these are subjects, but there's one of them that's going to be a direct object. And then that means it has to go in the last blank. So then you look at it and you say, whom he brought along. Okay, what did he do? He brought. Who brought? He. Okay, he brought. There's your subject verb. That means whom then ends up in the direct object spot. It is the objective case. We'll get to that later. I know this is super confusing, but just hang here with me. Just write down circle whom in your notes and put that it is a direct object if it shows up. I'm not going to say that's all the time, but 99% of the time. Let's go with that. All right. The next thing that a dependent clause can do is show up as an adverb. So let's look at some examples there. It's going to modify the verb. So let's write that. Modify verb. That makes sense because it's an adverb. And sometimes it can modify an adjective or an adverb in the main clause. An adverb clause begins with a subordinating conjunction, which links the clause. And there are a list of those on page 540. So I'll let you take a look at those on your own. But we're going to put here sometimes another adjective or adverb. So sometimes, once in a while. And the subordinating conjunction is what starts this. Okay? So the relative pronoun begins the adjective clause. Subordinating conjunction starts the adverbial clause. Let's just hop over there for a minute. No reason why we shouldn't. To page 540. And right there in the middle of that page, it gives you a big old long list. After, although, as if, as though, because, before, even if, even though. And if you are at all plugged in on this Monday morning, you are going to recognize that those are a bunch of words that we see pop up in other places. They pop up either as prepositions or clausal. These are clauses that we're talking about, like the clausal openers. So I would maybe take a picture of that list on 540 with your phone and maybe include it in these notes. It will help you as you are trying to pick that apart. I'm not going to write all of those right there. Then, if you look at how those are diagrammed, let's read the sentence. I will praise my Maker while I have my breath. It's very similar to the way that the adjectives are done. It's just going to come off the verb and not one of the nouns. So if you notice, I will praise is the verb, and then the word while, it's answering kind of the when question. It can also answer the how or to what extent question. And then I have breath is the secondary clause, the secondary skeleton that gets diagrammed, and while is what connects it. Subordinating conjunctions are going to be written on the dotted line, whereas they can be in the adjectives, but they're definitely going to be on the dotted line there. So these dependent clauses can show up as adjective clauses, adverb clauses, which I also sometimes call adverbial clauses, and they can also show up as noun clauses. So here's another way that we're going to see nouns popping into the picture. A noun clause can function as the subject, direct object, predicate, nominative, or almost any other sentence part that a noun can fill. So, noun clause will be the subject of the sentence, the direct object of the sentence, the indirect object of the sentence, according to what they said, the predicate, nominative. Anywhere a noun comes in, it can be one of those. So let's take a look at that. Let's look at the example. I don't think there's any connecting words that you have to worry about here. Maybe the word that. No, I'm not saying other lists. Okay. Father said that I may go along to town. So what we want to do is we want to ask the questions who said. Well, Father. What did Father do? Father said. There's our subject and verb. Now, the next question that you guys should be in the habit of asking is, Father said what? And if you can answer that question, then you have a direct object. We can answer that question. Father said what? Father said, well, it's a whole big long list of words here that he said. Then I may go along to town. Well, what do I do with that whole big long list of words? Well, if you were with us last year, you learned about diagramming on pedestals with noun clauses and with verbals. This isn't a verbal. This is just a noun clause, and it's going to get put on this little pedestal because it's got to stay on the main line. Father said what? Well, we draw the little pedestal, and then we have I may go. I am the subject. May go is the verb. And then we put the word that in there because that was included in the phrase. So this one is the more complicated, but I'm going to put here that it's diagrammed often on that pedestal. I won't say forever, but here's your subject and your verb. And then the other words come off the line just like they always would. So I told you for a while that things were easy peasy. Well, in one little term, they're not anymore. So what I need for you to do is just be aware that it has gotten a little harder. Now, I do want to take a look at the diagramming just a little bit more before I send you off to do the homework tomorrow. So hopefully you have this. If you don't have this completely written down, then please pause the video and do that. But I'm going to erase it. We're going to look at the diagramming and then we'll be finished with this. So hopefully you have enough information in that chart, plus you have lots of examples. I would strongly suggest that, just like I told you to take a picture of that list, take a picture of these samples and put them on index cards or put them in your notes so you can remember adverb clause, noun clause, adjective clause. This is what they do. It will really help you because I can't possibly show you every scenario for diagramming and have you get them all exactly right. But I do want to take a look a little bit more at the noun clause. I think that is the hardest one with the diagramming. And I want to take a look at a really long one here. And what we have here is after the rain ended, the creek that flows through our meadow was flooded. So the first thing we have to do after the rain ended, the creek that flows through our meadow whoops, I'm not spelling correctly there, was flooded. Now I'm going to encourage you to get out some colored pencils or crayons. It is much easier if we diagram, if we first look at the clauses, because we got to find what's the independent clause and what's the dependent clause. Well, what is the main deal with this sentence? Is it that is my big speech after the rain ended, or is my speech the creek that flows through our garden meadow, or was it that the creek was flooded? Well, I've got to look for clue words here. Here's a clue word right here, after. Remember, we looked at subordinating conjunctions. That's one of them. Another clue word is the word that. Who, which, that. That is also a clue that I've got a dependent clause, but I got to pick it all apart. Well, the first clause, after the rain ended, can it stand by itself? Absolutely not. It just can't. It is a dependent clause. And I am going to circle that one in green. So it is a dependent for sure. Well, I have another clue. I'm actually going to put it in a different color. I have another clue word, that flows through our meadow. Can that one stand alone? Again, no, it can't. This is dependent. Through our meadow. Now, they've both got subject and verbs. Rain ended. That flows, subject, verb. All right, I have a few words left. The creek was flooded. I think that could be our independent piece that we are looking for. Because that's the big message that I need to convey. The creek was flooded. The problem here is that it is divided, it is cut by this guy. That's okay. But this is our independent clause. Now, I would really love to see color on your homework when you come back. But what we need to remember is that our independent clause is the creek was flooded. That is the one, and if you look on page 80 at the very top, you're going to see creek was flooded in the main diagramming line. So if you're not looking at that with me, you need to. I don't have enough board space to put all of this up. But the creek was flooded is the main one. It's going to go on the top line. Then you will see that the word that has a dotted line coming. The creek, this modifies, that is modifying creek, is going to have a dotted line that comes down. See that? And the only thing that can be a subject is the word that. So if you give up, you can't find any other nouns, just put that, who, which, whatever. And you'll notice that flows through the meadow. There's other things that are coming, our other modifying words are there. But through the meadow is modifying flows. I don't even care about the prepositional phrases and the thes and all of that. Then the hardest one to me to know where to place it is after the rain ended. And it's like, where do I put this? Do I put it about the flowing? I've got to put it most likely with a verb because it's telling me when. And you got to think about the question and answers. This is telling me when. Well, it happened before the rain, after the rain, during the rain. It's telling me when, after the rain ended. But does it go with this verb or this verb? Well, I'm always going to err on the side of putting it in the main line. And yes, that's where it needs to go. After the rain ended, the creek was flooded. So if you notice on your diagramming sample there, the word after is also cutting down with the dashed line, and after is going to go on the line. Remember, we said that in our little chart. And then we look for the subject and verb. So we have 3 subjects and verbs in this. So you got to get away from thinking there's only one subject and verb anymore. You've hit the big time. We've got lots of subjects and verbs now, and they're all in individual clauses, and you have to find them all. We have lots of wonderful examples here, though. So you need to look at those samples. I'm not going to go through every single one with you, but I want you to spend a little more time after the video ends, and I want you to look at them, because then when you get diagramming homework, you have samples there to follow. So don't come to me and say, Mrs. Jernigan, I can't figure these diagrams out. Use the samples, because sometimes they're very close to what the samples were. Wednesday in class, we're going to spend more time doing this. We're first going to review with some other diagramming, and then we will add some of these clauses on, so be prepared for that. If you have particular problems with the homework as you do it, make sure you circle or write a list of what you're having problems with so we can go over them in class. Please read through the has and do all the other things that are mentioned there, and I will plan to see you on Wednesday.